Good afternoon. I'm pleased to introduce Chris Longenecker, who will be sharing poetry with us this afternoon. Our family has known Chris for many years. First, I'll read some of the information that was in our monthly, what is it called, from Landis Holmes about Chris. One thing that's not in here, she was born in a leap year, so she's just barely reached 15 years old. And I think she was a good friend of our daughter, Anne. And our daughter, Anne, said she never wanted to grow up. And Chris says she's not sure she'll make 21. She only gets a birthday every 4 years. So that's a piece of information about Chris that always is interesting. Her mother is Catherine Longenecker, who is probably looking in. Hello, Catherine. And her father was Dan, who lived here until he passed away. What year was that? 2020. That's also when our daughter Anne died. Anne and Chris were, I guess we could say, bosom buddies for like 40 years. And we consider Chris a daughter of ours as well as a daughter of the Longeneckers. So we've known her many, many years. I'll describe her by her own self-description here a little bit, reading in her book of poetry that came out some years ago. Did you bring any of these with you, Chris? Do you still have some? No. Okay, you can borrow ours, I guess, if you sign for it and promise to give it back. It's called How Trees Must Feel. In this little book of poetry, she describes herself in various ways in poetry. And first she says, one place she says this: if God does conquer me, he'll have me as a lioness, not a lamb. Remember that? Yeah, they said that. She also said, now I'm not a lady. She looks like one, but she says she's not, all right? Here's one at age 38. I was past witty and light years beyond a cavalier. So he would settle down by, well, that wouldn't have been 38. You would have been some other number, but it would have been 38 years, actually. Your birthdays wouldn't have indicated that. She had a chance meeting with an elderly woman while walking, and this woman asked her, are you a journalist? She said, no, just a secretary. So she was a secretary. And then this woman said, there is no just a. There's no just a anything. So I hope you took that to heart. Chris is not just a anything. She is a wonderful poet. She's going to share with us her thoughts and her expressions. A very thoughtful person, deep thinker, not afraid to face reality and express it in her own words. She's a gifted crafter of images and words. Her poetry can make you laugh or cry and make you think and make you feel. And I think we'll experience that this afternoon. So, Chris, we love your poetry. We love you. We're looking forward to this. Welcome.
Thanks, Don. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the farthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. But not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Oh, my arrows aren't working for my pictures. Well, if we can, I have pictures to go with the poetry. We'll see if they can come up or not. I'll just keep going and we'll figure that out hopefully later. Welcome to a poetry program about love and loss. Love and loss go together, unfortunately or fortunately. I read recently that death is not the enemy. There is no enemy. It's just that our bodies are fragile. They don't last forever. That's partly why we love them, I guess. So I also remember my Aunt Alice, when she was about my age now, in her 60s, and I was in my late 30s, not married, and she said to me one time that one good thing about being single was that you would never have to deal with or face the loss of a spouse. And, she didn't know that she would end up dying before her husband and that I would end up getting married. I haven't yet experienced the loss of a spouse, and I hope I never do, but somebody goes first usually. And I imagine some of you, probably because of your ages being a little older than mine, may have experienced that loss, but have probably experienced a lot more love and a lot more loss than I have. Shall we take it out and put it back in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I should.
Maybe that's the...
Okay, clicking on there. I can't see that because I don't have my glasses there.
Landis Holmes, where was it?
Okay. Now the slideshow. Which is slideshow, this one. Where am I at here?
Let's see that. Okay.
Why isn't it coming up, Bill?
Is that what you clicked on, the slideshow?
Yeah, slideshow.
Now you're on animation or
Okay,
something.
go down slideshow. Go to that one.
Okay.
Click on it again. Okay, come over here to shoot from beginning. There, click on that.
Okay. And then this?
No, it should come.
There we go.
Okay.
And then how do we get rid of the...
Why isn't it coming up in the slideshow format?
Oh, maybe I should click that again.
There's a tiny little screen icon. I think if you click on
Yeah, where?
that little screen right there,
Oh,
that will make it full
where's
screen.
the cursor? Can't find it.
Cursor is.
Yeah, it was just down. It flipped up here. I don't have my glasses.
This would be the place.
Yeah, I see. The little white thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little
Let,
bit.
let me get
It's
it.
like a pull down on a movie screen.
What's up above?
I'm not good at
Yeah,
using
I
my
don't
finger.
I don't have my glasses on either.
The cursors. There's the cursor.
Okay, now we got it.
Bring it down to that little, up above on the white part. Over to. Next one. Right there.
Slideshow? Okay. Okay. Back.
Just use the arrow to move back and forth.
Yeah, should be able to.
Okay, Good.
As it was doing that.
We're back in business. Technology, oh boy. Anyway, okay, so it's working. I want to dedicate today's program to my father, my best friend, and a mentor and friend that I lost in 2020. My dad, Dan Longenecker, some of you may have known him. He lived here for the last 8 years of his life, but he lived 78 wonderful years before he moved here too. Without him, of course, I wouldn't be here physically, but he gave me a lot more than just life. And of course, my mother, she's still here. She's watching from Cedar, her room in Cedar right now. And Dad has a brother that lives here, Ed, and his wife, Rhoda. And then my friend Ann. Without Ann, I probably wouldn't be here in Lancaster County. She was my strongest link to moving here. She was a connection to just about everything important in my life once I met her. And sometimes I wonder if she had some influence in my life before I even met her. It seemed so natural when I met her that we were like, I don't know, what they called kindred spirits. But she died the same year that Dad did. And also Dee Dee. Dee Dee is the third person I want to dedicate the program to today. He was a mentor and a friend. His wife there is pictured with him. I met him through the theater of the Seventh Sister when I first moved to Lancaster. And I figured out the other day he was probably my first real non-Mennonite friend. I was 26. Can you imagine? I was pretty sheltered. But anyway, he was a wonderful friend and mentor. This next poem is specifically for my dad. He was the first person I shared it with when it was finished, and he said it was good. And that was so important to me. And I invite you also to think about who you would dedicate this program to in your own heart and mind, someone who you lost, or maybe more than one person that is still with you in some way, but not physically here. In fall, when black oak leaves and sycamore line the wide sidewalk where I walk to work, I like to look to where they've fallen from. I look up, lean way back, there they all cling, deciding when and where and how to drop. Sometimes I stand a while watching one leaf I think is ripe for letting go the tree. I fix on one I think looks kind of tired, the way a child looks fighting sleep, whose eyes droop long before she'll give her tiny hand into her father's to be led to bed. I think perhaps she'll honor me to see the moment when the letting go occurs. God knows I wouldn't tell a soul. I'd keep her secret like I'd keep my own if she would trust me. I know I could keep still when it comes to leaves. Role models are so few and far between for letting go. Sometimes I stand quite close to a low branch or even touch some brown leaves slightly to see if I can figure when they'll plunge. But what I really want to know is how they go so gracefully when done. Like one relinquishes a handshake at the door when talk runs out and all the tea is gone. Leaves look so fine the way they say farewell. A heart-shaped scar, the only sign of pain. They just drop down, they just drop gently down. No tears to make an ointment for a grave. Surrender is all they would have me know. And I am nearly taken in each fall. But I have seen some winters come and go, and I have loved a little, and I know there are more ways to die, Horatio, than fall philosophy has dreamt of. Not always grace sufficient will supply the wherewithal to like it when you die. Some will hang on past dying, into snow, well into winter, even to next year. For some, it takes a great wind from the north. For those who absolutely won't let go, it takes the buds of spring to push them out, like baby teeth. Don't ask me how I know. I'd rather go the first way, though. Truly, I would prefer it. To give a curtsy in my brightest dress and laugh as it swelled out like a balloon. Of course, we'll have to see. I'd rather. But it comforts me to know that if I get all crazy at the end and make a scene, I'm still within the realm of natural things, who also sometimes cling. My dad was one of those people that clung at the end. I was told when he moved to healthcare that the average length of stay in healthcare was 2 to 2.5 years. Dad was there for 4 years. And by the time he died, he couldn't talk, he couldn't move, but he loved life, and he clung. And I tell myself, it's okay, it's still within the realm of natural things to cling. But one of my, probably my first dead friend was Robert Frost. You know you can have dead friends, of course, right? I have several now. And Robert I met when he was probably dead for 10 years. I met him through his poetry. And through him, I've met his wife and his kids and lots of his friends. He knew a lot about loss. And I won't list all the losses of his life, but I think one of the most significant losses, if not the most significant, had to be his mother, his wife. I was going to say his father, and then I got it all mixed up. His wife, Eleanor. He lost his father when he was 11. That was the first big loss of his life. And he lost his mother when he was in his early 20s. But his wife, Eleanor White, he said this about her after she died to a friend. She has been the unspoken half of everything I ever wrote, and both halves of many a thing. So if you do the math, she should get more than half the credit for the poetry that we ascribe to Robert. It should be Robert and Eleanor, or White Frost. Her last name was White, Eleanor White. They used to joke about it, and I sometimes think that if they had lived now, they would have hyphenated their last name, and they would have been White Frost. And maybe, since now is a time when women are a little more liberated, they would have co-authored the poetry and given her the credit that she deserved. Anyway, since he said that most of the poetry he wrote was that she was the unspoken half of it, he also said, pretty nearly every one of my poems will be found to be about her, if rightly read. When Janice asked me to do this program, I just happened to be in the middle of memorizing the first book that he published after Eleanor died. And a lot of the poems in there, I'm pretty sure, are him processing her gone, or her being gone. So I chose 3 of them. This one is the first one from it's the title poem from the book A Witness Tree. That's the title of the book. Where my imaginary line bends square in woods, an iron spine and pile of real rocks has been founded, and off this corner in the wild where these are driven in and piled, one tree, by being deeply wounded, has been impressed as witness tree and made commit to memory my proof of being not unbounded. Thus truth's established and borne out, though circumstanced by dark and doubt, though by a world of doubt surrounded. I just love that part where he says, thus truth's established and borne out, though circumstanced by dark and doubt. Truth's established, my proof of being not unbounded. He was not unbounded. He was bound by his love, to Eleanor, love of so many people on this earth. And he claimed it in spite of his doubts, in spite of his losses. I remember my friend Anne often talking about doubt, and I think doubt and faith just go together, kind of like love and loss. You really almost can't have one without the other. This next poem is an expression of some of Robert's disillusionment, I think, in his grief. It's in two parts, the wind and the rain. In the first part, I want you to imagine a person being pushed by the wind, the wind at their back. I couldn't get a picture of anything like that. Everybody's always walking into the wind to keep their balance, I guess. But imagine the wind pushing you from behind and you're using your feet to brake. Imagine a young man doing that, because that's what he's talking about when he starts this poem. That far-off day, the leaves in flight were letting in the colder light. A season-ending wind there blew, that as it did the forest strew, I leaned on with a singing trust, and let it drive me deathward too. With breaking step I stabbed the dust, yet did not much to shorten stride. I sang of death, but had I known the many deaths one must have died before he came to meet his own? Oh, should a child be left unwarned, that every song in which he mourned would be as if he prophesied? It were unworthy of the tongue to leave the half of life alone and sing the good without the ill. And yet 'twould seem that what is sung in happy sadness by the young, fate has no choice but to fulfill. Flowers in the desert heat contrive to bloom on melted mountain water led by flume to wet their feet. But something in it still is incomplete. Before I thought the wilted to exult with water, I would see them water bowed. I would pick up all ocean, less its salt, and though it were as much as cloud could bear, would load it onto cloud, and rolling it inward on roller air, would empty it unsparing on the flower that past its prime lost petals in the flood. Who cares but for the future of the bud? And all the more, the mightier the shower would run in under it to get my share. 'Tis not enough on roots and in the mouth, but give me water heavy on the head, in all the passion of a broken drought. And there is always more than should be said. As strong is rain without as wine within, as magical as sunlight on the skin. I have been one no dwelling could contain when there was rain, but I must forth at dusk, my time of day, to see to the unburdening of skies. Rain was the tears adopted by my eyes that have none left to stay. In this next poem is a little more positive. He uses the metaphor of Eve. He uses Eve's name, but I think he was talking about Eleanor. I tend to think about Anne when I hear this poem because of her voice. I want you to think about the voice of someone that you knew well that died. Maybe somebody whose voice you heard every day, and maybe you thought you'd never not hear it. But now it's gone, and maybe sometimes you still hear echoes of it or think you do. That's what this poem's about. He would declare and could himself believe that the birds there in all the garden round, from having heard the day-long voice of Eve, had added to their own an oversound, the tone of meaning but without the words. Admittedly, an eloquence so soft could only have had an influence on birds when call or laughter carried it aloft. Be that as it may, she was in their song. Moreover, her voice, upon their voices crossed, had now persisted in the woods so long that probably it never would be lost. Never again would birds' song be the same. And to do that to birds was why she came. This next poem was one that I wrote for Anne. I was working on it when she was dying, and I didn't tell her about it right away because I didn't want her to think I had given up on her getting better. But I did tell her that I was working on it towards the end, but I thought I had a lot more time with her. I expected that I'd be able to share it with her. We only talked about the fact that I was working on one, and I told her I was having trouble getting a music metaphor into it, and she gave me permission not to include a music metaphor. So I used the metaphor of a spider. She was, like I said, a connection for me to so many important things. So I called the poem Liaison. And in the first line, there's a reference to Abiquiu, and I should explain that Abiquiu is a place in New Mexico. Anne and Danielle, her husband, is here today, and her parents, I should say, Don and Doris. They introduced me to New Mexico, and Abiquiu in particular was a place that we went several times. The hills of Abiquiu put you in mind of knees, you say, of many reddish knees. The silver sliver of the newest moon, the clipping of a single fingernail, and baby's arms are sausages. Oh, please, and you call me a poet. You're the one who flings the gossamer string and zips and swings between the fast and vast interstices, raptly unraveling, reveling as you sail, connecting every blessed mystery with ordinary trivialities. You do it naturally, like drawing breath. And when this dreaded mystery called death comes with a thud, unwelcome and unkind, and like most endings, though it come too soon, you will not be put off the final goal you have it hidden in you to achieve. Not though you have to seize earth by the pole, believe in things you never would believe, not though you have to molt all but your soul to catch sufficient lift so as to weave the web you need to weave to reach the sun. Not though you have to do what can't be done. You will connect all manner of loose things. You will connect through time, past history, then back to here to what is yet to be. You will connect us all till we come to, shuffling our mortal coils after you. She was my liaison to many things in life, and now she's my liaison to death. Robert Frost also had a best friend. His best friend was Edward Thomas. They met in England. Robert was about 40. He moved his family to England to try to get the attention of the publishers there because he wasn't having any success here in America. And he met many poets over there, but one of them was Edward Thomas, and they became very close friends, kindred spirits, you'd call them. They didn't have long together. They only had a few years before World War I started. And after much agonizing decision-making, Edward decided to enlist, and he was killed in World War I. And years later, this poem was published about a walk that they took together one time. And it's called Iris by Night. They did what they called botanizing. They went looking for plants, looking for flowers, and sometimes at night, sometimes the daytime. Robert had learned how to do botanizing from his friend back in America, Carl Burrell. So he and Edward would go for walks and identify flowers. And here's the poem that he wrote for Edward. One misty evening, one another's guide, we two were groping down a Malvern side, the last wet fields and dripping hedges home. There came a moment of confusing lights, such as according to belief in Rome was seen of old at Memphis on the heights, before the fragments of a former sun could concentrate anew and rise as one. Light was a paste of pigment in our eyes. And then there was a moon, and then a scene so watery as to seem submarine, in which we two stood saturated, drowned. The clover-mingled rowan on the ground had taken all the water it could as dew, and still the air was saturated too. Its airy pressure turned to water weight. Then a small rainbow, like a trellis gate, a very small, moon-made, prismatic bow, stood closely over us through which to go. And then we were vouchsafed the miracle that never yet to other two befell, and I alone of us have lived to tell. A wonder, bow and rainbow as it bent, instead of moving with us as we went, to keep the pots of gold from being found, it lifted from its dewy pediment its two mote-swimming, many-colored ends, and gathered them together in a ring. And we stood in it, softly circled round by all division time or foe can bring, in a relation of elected friends. I just love that poem. Did you know rainbows are actually circles? They really are. We usually only see half of them. But they had that moment of being encircled by one. Well, I have one more poem that I chose to do today, and after I'm done with this one, I would like to offer you the opportunity to make requests if you have any Robert Frost poetry that you were hoping to hear today that I didn't include in the program. That would be your opportunity to ask for whatever you want. I brought the book along in case I don't have it memorized, or maybe you have it memorized and want to come up here and share it with the rest of us, or we could say it together. But this next poem is one that I wrote. It took me about 10 years to write it. I left it sitting for a long time. But I dedicate it to Dee Dee, because Dee Dee was the first person I shared it with when I was beginning to work on it. And he laughed at just the right moment in the beginning of it and encouraged me to keep going with it, so I did. But it was before I knew a whole lot about loss, and later when I had another draft of it, I shared it with another mentor of mine, and he said he thought it was a little flippant in tone. And I found out later that his daughter was dying at the time. So I went back and looked at it again and changed a few things, and of course now I've experienced more loss, so I hope it doesn't come across as flippant. It isn't meant to. The title comes from the song, "O Love That Wilt Not Let Me Go," from the Life Songs book, I believe. And I should tell you, it's a long poem. It takes about 5 minutes to say, so just relax and realize it will be over eventually. I just rambled, I guess. Couldn't stop myself. Couldn't figure out how to shorten it. I hope it's raining when I die, and that the waves are crashing high and lightning flashing in the sky. I'd like to go out with a roar of thunder and a good downpour, the kind that makes me feel secure, all cozy, huddled in my bed, all tucked about the neck and head, even though tomorrow I'll be dead. Or maybe I should hope for snow. Yes, snow might be the way to go. An inch, a blizzard, I don't know. For feeling cozy and secure, there's nothing better, that's for sure. And snow does something even more. Not only does it make no sound, caressing every inch of ground, it makes the whole thing feel profound. It's natural to imagine death, how one might draw one's final breath and what one might surround it with. What metaphor or simile, hyperbole or subtlety might turn it into poetry, where last lines often are the best, illuminating all the rest, and everyone is so impressed. And yet I know one can't foresee, much less control mortality. One has to let what will be, be. The where and when, if I'd decide, would mean the how of how I died would be determined suicide, which still, though not, you may agree, the sin it maybe used to be, is not my kind of poetry. No, when I die, the weather may be nothing but a tired cliche, and I won't have a thing to say. If there's to be precipitation with interesting interpretation, it will be none of my creation. I may die murdered in my sleep, or so demented I just keep on sinking till I'm 6 feet deep. Whatever weather passes through or happens by will have to do. No pressure, but it will be you who survive me, looking back. The system, if there's one to track, much less a meaning to unpack, yours to interpret, or invent, or trace if you can find the scent, the pattern, what the whole thing meant. As if the weather ever stood for anything, as if it could mean something meaningful, or should. But meaning comes when it is sought, the same way poetry is wrought, with mother loads of afterthought and reverie, not but retroactively supplied by anyone but me, since I, as I've already said, can't help this time, since I'll be dead. No longer lying here in bed thinking back and back until things coalesce. And there's that thrill, that aha moment, if you will, when everything all comes together, the sound, the meaning, and the weather. And you could be felled by a feather when everything you thought you knew turns out to be not only true, but different also, simpler too. But you, it will be you, not me, who has the last epiphany about my life, if one's to be. Me, I'll be dead, as I keep saying, and rain or shine, I won't be weighing the pros and cons, I'll be decaying. Not gasping famous last words, though, just giving back the life I owe to the love that would not let me go, yielding up the flickering days I borrowed from the fairer rays of the light that followed all my ways. Those are stanzas from a song I knew when I was young and thought them true. The funny thing is, I still do. It matters how you say a thing and to what truths you choose to cling in all those songs we used to sing. It's not just fun, though, there's a cost. For every truth you claim, one's lost. I learned that truth from Robert Frost. If you claim love, you must discard some walls, for starters, which is hard. But he said, trust me, I'm a bard. And I could name a braver one who never even wrote words down, yet with them crumbled laws of stone. And he said, trust me, I'm God's son. Or rather, he called God our Father, whose bosom gathers like a mother, which makes him something like a brother. You choose your favorite metaphor. I've got to end this one before the climate changes even more, and weather is no more the leaven that lifts so easily to heaven we who don't know what we've been given. whatever metaphor you ride, or melody on which you glide, to safety on the other side. And whether you land dignified, or mystified, or terrified, let's promise now, however wide we land from where we aimed our pride, we'll seek each other, bleary-eyed, and share our sagas once we've died. I added that part about whatever melody you ride for Anne because I knew that for me it was mostly words that I toyed with, but for her it was music. Music was what she glided on. So we have a little time left. If there are any requests from any of you, Polly, you already have your hand up.
A time to talk?
Ah, yes. A Time to Talk by Robert Frost. How does it start? That's always my problem. The very first line, I can look it up. When a friend calls to me from the road, when a friend calls to me from the road and slows his horse to a meaning walk, I don't stand still and look around at all the fields I haven't hoed and shout from where I am, "What is it?" No, not as there is a time to talk. I thrust my hoe in the mellow ground, blade end up and 5 feet tall, and plod. I go up to the wall for a friendly visit. Yeah. A Time to Talk, it's called. Yeah. Back here is one.
About the snowy wood.
Oh, you probably know that one too. Stopping by woods in the snowy evening?
Yes.
So many people know this one, so I'm thinking maybe we could just say it together, or say whatever part of it you know. How does it start? Let's see. Whose woods these are? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Yep. Birches. Is that you, Doris? Birches, okay. Birches is a great one. And it's kind of on the theme for today, too. When I see birches bend to left and right across the line of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often, you must have seen them a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust, such heaps of broken glass to clean away you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they're bowed so low for long they never right themselves. You can see them arching their trunks in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storms, I should prefer to have some boy bend them while going out or in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to play baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again till he had worn the what out of them? I forget. Worn the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it and one eye's weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it again and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Anybody have another one? Okay, well, I'm going to end with one other one then. This one is just a short one that Robert wrote, which I absolutely love. It's called I Could Give All to Time. To time, it never seems that he is brave to set himself against the peaks of snow and lay them level with the running wave. Nor is he overjoyed when they lie low, but only grave, contemplative and grave. What now is inland shall be ocean isle, then eddies curling round a sunken reef, like the curl in the corner of a smile. And I could share time's lack of joy and grief at such a change in planetary style. I could give all to time, except what I myself have held. But why declare the things forbidden that while customs slept, I have crossed to safety with? For I am there, and what I would not part with, I have kept. Thank you for coming today. That's it. Oh.
Thank you, Chris. You have made me laugh and you have made me cry. Thank you. I think that's a fitting end. I don't know if you want to meet the folks out back. Okay. Everyone, thanks again to Chris. Maybe another hand.